Hi! Today I am doing my January wrap-up. I read 17 books. This was a pretty large reading month. Sometimes I read a lot, like December I think I read 16 or 17 books as well, so it just kind of depends on the month, but I drive a lot. So I listen to quite a few audiobooks and that's how I read so much. That's why there's so many books in my wrap-ups. I'm kind of thinking about maybe doing mid-month wrap-ups. I have a feeling that I'm gonna feel kind of rushed to talk about 17 books in a short enough time period to make it in one video. I'll kind of see how it goes this time, but let me know what you think about maybe doing mid-month wrap-ups instead of one at the very end talking about a whole bunch of books. But I just want to go ahead and get started. I read 3 5-star books, 1 4.5-star book, 3 4-star books, 6 3-star books, 2 2.5-star books, and 2 2-star books. So I was kind of all over the place with my rating this month, more 3 stars than anything else, obviously. So this was not a super great reading month when it comes to quality of the books. I don't normally have like 2 stars and 2.5 stars. I usually don't finish them. I don't DNF a lot, but I'm usually pretty good about picking the kind of books that I read as well so that I don't struggle with that, with having books that I don't like, because I don't like to DNF. I don't like to put them down once I start them because I always am afraid that it's just a slow start and I'll eventually like it and things like that. So I have a hard time DNFing books. So I usually try to be pretty good about what I choose so I don't really have to decide that, but this month wasn't super great. Okay, the first book that I read in the month of January was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I loved this book. I loved it. It was super unexpected. It's not a kind of novel that I would normally pick up. It's not something that is really up my alley, but I decided to listen to it on audio, which I highly recommend, just like everybody else says. Highly recommend the audiobook. It was fantastic. I listened to that and I was so pleasantly surprised. It was incredible. I don't even know another word to describe it. It's absolutely incredible. The book is about this band, the Six, and this girl, Daisy Jones. It's set in the 70s. The Six are kind of their own separate entity. Daisy Jones is kind of her own separate entity, and they wind up together, performing together. And that's what the story is really about, is the relationship between the 7 of them. And really, Daisy Jones and Billy, who is like the lead guy of the Six. And you just kind of go along and you follow them on tour. You follow how their relationship progresses. There were times when I hated Daisy. There were times when I hated Billy, but I also loved them both. It was such a like up and down kind of read. It was an emotional roller coaster because my feelings kept changing about the characters. So Billy is in love with this girl named Camilla, and that's all I'll really tell you about Billy and Camilla. But towards the end, this might be a small spoiler, but I have systemic lupus and it's pretty severe. We find out in the very end of the novel that Camilla has lupus, and the way that it was talked about, how it kind of ruined her life, changed her life completely, and how, you know, they're saying people seeing it from the outside, they would never wish it on their worst enemy. And I just felt really seen. I felt really heard with the way it was portrayed in the end of the novel. It really hit really close to home. And so I think that's part of the reason why this was so important to me. I know a lot of people give it 5 stars anyway. It's very widely loved, but for me it was very, very special, and it's a book that I will always remember. The second book that I read in January was Fairest by Marissa Meyer. So this is the first novella in the series. So it's technically 3.5 in the series. So this comes after Cress, and it is the story of Queen Lavanna. It's Queen Lavanna's story. There's not really much I can say about it because it's, you know, farther into the series, but I've talked about the Lunar Chronicles a couple times on my channel in the past. So this is, the first book is called Cinder, and it's a Cinderella retelling, and it's about this girl named Cinder who's a cyborg, and throughout all the books, you're finding out who Cinder is, what's important about her, things like that. And she is trying to save the Prince Kai. They're trying to find an antidote to this horrible disease called leishmaniasis that's killing everyone. They're also trying to prevent a war with the Lunars, which are people from the moon. So there's lots of different things going on in the story. The second book follows Scarlet, who's a Red Riding Hood retelling. The third book follows Cress, who is a Rapunzel retelling. And then the fourth book is Winter, and that one follows Snow White. So I love this series so far. I gave this 4 stars. It could have been a little bit better, but I also liked it a lot more than some people liked Fairest. So I'm super excited to continue on with the series. I will read Winter this month in February, and then hopefully there's another novella called Stars Above that I can get to in February as well. The third book that I read in February was Frenchman's Creek by Daphne du Maurier. I gave this one 2.5 stars. Lots of reviews of people loving it, but it just was not for me. Again, I listened to this one on audio, and I found myself drifting, my mind wandering. I couldn't focus. I kept getting lost in the story because I was bored. Aside from that, this woman, so this is about Donna, who becomes bored and restless at home with her husband and her kids, and decides to escape to the British countryside for adventure. And that's where she meets a pirate who they call the Frenchman. He has a name, but they don't say his name often. They just call him the Frenchman. And she finds this like great passion with this pirate when she has a husband and kids back at home. No, I don't get down with those kind of books. They irritate me. I can look past gray characters, morally gray characters. I can look, you know, sometimes I enjoy characters that are the bad guy and things like that, but for whatever reason, when it comes to infidelity, it's not for me. I cannot get down with a book that someone cheating and then you're supposed to root for that person and the person they're having an affair with. No, it's just not for me. So I gave this one 2.5 stars. A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I also gave 5 stars. I love this book. I love this book. And the ending, oh my God, the ending, I need the third book, like ASAP. I know we're getting it this year, but I think it's in April. I don't want to wait that long. Anyway, I loved this book. So I gave From Blood and Ash, which is the first book in the series, 4 stars because it was not perfect to me. However, I gave A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire 5. I loved it leaps and bounds more than From Blood and Ash. So this series is about this girl who is supposed to be the maiden. It's a really kind of complicated story, but pretty much she's hidden away. She's not allowed to interact with people. She's not allowed to do much of anything because she has to stay pure. And when she ascends, she's like the savior of it's crazy what they make this girl out to be. She has some things happen. She gets a new bodyguard, and that's where the story progresses. There's not a whole lot I can say about it because it would be spoilers. The story is like complex. It has lots of twists and turns and it's nuts. But Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, I loved so much. It is heavy on the romance. It is heavy on the romance between the maiden and her bodyguard. So I will say that, but I loved it. It's fantasy, 5 stars. Next was Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. I gave this 3 stars. This is a nonfiction about sleep. I liked it enough. I did give it 3 stars because I felt like there was a lot of unnecessary science in it that didn't really help convince me one way or another why sleep is so important. However, because I do have lupus, sleep is super important to me and always has been. So I've always been a huge advocate for proper amounts of sleep. And reading this book really just confirmed what I already thought about sleep. I did learn some things, obviously, about sleep, about melatonin, about caffeine, things like that. I really did learn a lot, but I just felt that it was too sciencey for the normal, everyday person to be able to comprehend everything. Either way, I do think it is an important read because I don't think enough people believe sleep is important or as important as it is. I would still recommend it. Next was Lovermind by J.R. Ward. This one I gave 4 stars. I have given many of these books in this series, the Black Dagger Brotherhood series, 5 stars. This one, for whatever reason, I just felt a 4-star when I finished with it, and usually I just stick with how I feel at the end when I finished it on my ratings. Sometimes I will go back and change my ratings every once in a while. There's one book in here that I changed my rating on after a few days of thinking on it. I changed my rating on Jane Eyre, which is one of my, if not my favorite book of all time, after sitting on it for a while. So sometimes I do, but normally I just stick with what I feel at the end of the novel. So this one I gave 4 stars. This is the 8th book in the series. The Black Dagger Brotherhood series is about this race of vampires who are the warriors of their race, the Black Dagger Brotherhood, and they are fighting this constant war with the Lessers, who are these weird human, not human creatures. And so the books follow along with that constant like underlying plot that goes through all of the books of their war. And then also each book follows 2 separate characters and their romance. So it is fantasy romance. It is urban fantasy. It's set in our world. So it's not hard to follow or anything like that. It's a very easily understood series, but I love it. I really, really love it. I've been reading this for a while. I'm reading book 9 right now. I'm hoping that I'll get some more 5 stars out of the series because the last couple have been 4s for me, but this was a 4-star. I still would highly, highly, highly recommend the series. It's very steamy though, so if you don't like the smut and you don't like those like steamy scenes, probably not for you, but I love it. Next is A Princess in Theory by Alyssa Cole. I gave this one 3 stars. This one was about this girl named Naledi, and she is a waitress and she's works in a lab. She keeps getting these emails from this African prince named Thabiso, and she thinks it's a bunch of malarkey. She doesn't believe it at all. She's like, she keeps deleting them. She doesn't even want to read them. She's not about it. But then Thabiso decides he's going to just show up because he believes her to be his betrothed from when they were younger. And so he shows up and has full intentions of going there, guns blazing, like, you need to come home, you need to marry me, get back to your real life. Mind you, Naledi has no idea that that's supposed to be her life. She has no idea. She was in foster care. Thabiso shows up, and at the restaurant that Naledi works at when she's not at the lab, he shows up and she mistakes him for this guy named Jamal, who was supposed to be coming to be another server to work that she hired. And he plays along with it for a little while. And that's kind of where the story takes off, and that's the journey it starts out on. I do not like miscommunication. And I know this is technically not miscommunication, but the whole pretending to be someone else thing irks my nerves. So this wasn't a bad book by any means, but that's why I gave it 3 stars. that part, starting it off that way. The rest of the novel is good. It's a good book, but I could never truly get on board and I didn't feel the chemistry. It was all right. It wasn't bad, it was just all right. So I gave it 3 stars. Next, I read Tweet Cute by Emma Lord. This I gave 3 stars as well. This is about Pepper and Jack. And yes, they are called Pepper Jack at one point. This is a YA. It was cute. It was all right. There were times that I was kind of bored. It's about this girl and this boy. Each of them have their respective restaurants. Their parents own restaurants. Pepper's mother and father own a chain, and Jack's parents own like a little mom and pop shop, and they end up getting in a Twitter battle, the 2 restaurants. And the Twitters are run by Pepper and Jack instead of HR teams, which is beyond me, but it's them fighting back and forth through their respective restaurants and not knowing that each other are running the Twitter. They go to school together. They're on the swim team and the dive team. They are together a lot, but they don't know that it's the other one that they're constantly in this Twitter fight with. So it's cute. It wasn't anything like super special to me, so that's why I gave it 3 stars. Next was A Duke by Default by Alyssa Cole. I gave this 3 stars as well. This comes after A Princess in Theory. I did like this one a lot more than A Princess in Theory, but I hated the ending. So that's why I gave this one 3 stars. It's about Portia and Tavish. So Portia is Noletti's best friend from the first novel. And Portia ends up going to Scotland. She's a New York socialite, pretty much. And she ends up going to Scotland for an apprenticeship with a sword maker. Because she really doesn't know what she wants to do with her life. She doesn't know where she's headed, things like that. So she goes and she takes an apprenticeship with a sword maker, Tavish. And he ends up finding out that he is a duke. Has no idea. And that's kind of where their story goes. Tavish is a grumpy man. They're kind of enemies to lovers because they really don't get along in the beginning. But it was cute. I did like it a lot more than A Princess in Theory, but again, I hated the ending, so I gave it 3 stars. Nosferatu by Joe Hill. I gave 3 stars as well. This is about Charlie Manx, who is the bad guy. He has this Wraith, which is a Rolls Royce, it's a car, that allows him to kind of weave in and out of the everyday world. It allowed him to create Christmas Land, which is where he takes children. Victoria is a girl that has a gift. She's able to find things on her little bike. And she rides her bike and then a covered bridge appears and she goes over the bridge and then she's in a new place. And she ends up being captured by Charlie Manx when she's young and escaping. Charlie Manx has this little sidekick named Bing who I found annoying, but I listened to the audiobook. It is a really, really good audiobook. It truly is. So I would definitely recommend listening to it, but I felt like it was just too long. Like I thought we were done and then we weren't. I thought we were done and then we weren't. And Victoria pissed me off so many times because she's stupid. So it wasn't scary at all. It wasn't bad. I understand why some people love it, but it just wasn't for me. 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now by Jaron. It's either Lanier or Lanier. I gave this 2 stars. Something about the tone of this book and some of the things that were said really did not sit right with me. You wouldn't think that this kind of book would do this to me, but I felt icky at the end of it. I just did something. I can't put my finger on it. The tone, I don't know. And it's a nonfiction. It's not even something that should make you feel that way, but I just, I gave it 2 stars instead of 1 because there are aspects of it that are good advice, but just something about it. So I only gave it 2 stars. Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. I gave 4.5 stars. This is about Danny and Zaf, who are friends. Zaph is the security guard at her school. She's a teacher. It's a fake dating trope. I felt like there was some pretty good representation of anxiety in the novel, and I liked it. I did like it. It was really cute. I had a good time reading it, but there was something missing in it for me that I didn't quite like. That's why I didn't get 5 stars, but I did really like it. I see why people love it. I think I liked Chloe Brown a little bit better, if I'm honest, but I'm excited for Eve Brown to come out, Actor H. Eve Brown, because I have liked both of the books, and I'm sitting here thinking if I should have given this book 4 stars, not 4.5, because I don't have a lot to say about it. I don't have a lot of feelings, and that's not really a 4.5 star book. So, I don't know. I'm Not Dying With You Tonight by Kimberly Jones. I gave this book 5 stars. This book was incredible and so important. It's so important to read. It's a YA. It's about these girls named Campbell, who is white, and Lena, who is black. And Campbell has moved to a new school that's majority black. She ends up working the concession stand at a football game, and a fight breaks out, which turns into a riot. The story is about Campbell and Lena making their way through these riots, and it's so important to read because Lena's perspective is of this scared black girl who is trying to be tough because that's what she thinks she has to do. And Campbell, who is this naive white girl who is scared too, but she has no idea. She has no idea the struggles, the fears of a black person and their fears against police, their fears against the riots, everything. It was eye-opening, and I think it's such an important read. Granted, I'm not an own voice's opinion on Lena's perspective, but I think as a white person, it was very eye-opening for me and was important for me to read. And it's still fiction, so it's not, this, because some people are afraid of nonfiction, so to speak. They don't like nonfiction, they can't get into it. So this is a fictional story that I think people could really get a lot out of when it comes to race. The Bridges of Madison County by Robert James Waller. I gave this book 2 stars. I originally gave this book 1 star. The only reason that I gave it 2 stars is because it made me feel so many things. I was infuriated at this book. Again, it has that infidelity aspect to it, and I freaking hated it. I hated it. This is about Robert. Why Robert James Waller named his main character Robert, I don't know, unless this is semi-autobiographical, and we don't know. But it's about Robert and Francesca. Francesca is married with children, and her husband and kids have gone off somewhere for the week. I can't remember where. And Robert is a photographer, and he's in the area, and driving down the road, he stops at her house for directions. And that's where their love story begins. And I just freaking hated it. I hated this book. I hated it. I don't have anything good to say about it. The only reason it has 2 stars instead of 1 is because it made me so angry. So it made me feel things. It didn't make me feel the right things, but it made me feel things. So I gave it 2 stars, but I hate it. I freaking hate it. Why is it a thing to have books that these people, both of these in this wrap-up have been women, who go out and have an affair and then want to come home and pretend everything's normal? Ugh, it just made me so angry. So this one I gave 2 stars. Next was The Shining by Stephen King. I gave this 3 stars. This is about Jack Torrance. Most people know what this book is about. They've either heard about the book or they've seen the movie. I read this for the late night book club. It's about Jack Torrance and Wendy, his wife, and Danny, his son, who end up going to the Overlook Hotel so that Jack can be the caretaker, and insanity ensues, literally. The Overlook Hotel itself is this entity that is evil and trying to take over their lives. It's not a bad book. There was language in it that was very jarring, and I felt that there were descriptions that were unnecessary, which I feel like is pretty common for King, from what I've heard. But this is the first Stephen King I have ever read, and it's kind of made me nervous because, I mean, I have quite a few other Kings, and I'm nervous to read them now because this put me in a reading slump. It took me over 2 weeks to read it, and it's 450 pages because I just didn't want to read it. I'm glad I did read it, but I didn't want to at the time. So I only gave it 3 stars. I know some people love it, but I don't know if I would really recommend it. I don't know how I really feel about this one. I'm kind of just like sitting in the middle, still thinking on it. Next was The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. I gave this one 2.5 stars. This is about a woman who comes to take care of some children. The house is haunted, pretty much. Is it haunted? Is it not haunted? Is she crazy? Is she not crazy? Are the children bad? Are the children not bad? It wasn't for me. I had a hard time understanding it. It's a classic, so I have a hard time with classics sometimes, but I went online and I read a summary, and I understood pretty much what there was to understand. I just thought there was more. And when I tell you, I hated the ending. I freaking hated it. I don't know what happened. I know what was written. I know what the words say, but what caused that? What in the world happened? I don't know. I wish there was, I wish it was a little bit longer and there was more explanation. There was more something. I don't know. 2.5 stars because it wasn't terrible. I liked the premise of it. I feel like it could have been much better, but not the best. And the last book that I read in the month of January was Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. I gave this one 4 stars. I really liked this book. It's YA, and it's about this boy named Simon who is the chosen one, pretty much, the one with the most power, with the most magic, and his roommate Baz is a vampire, but they don't know, he doesn't confirm that he's a vampire for quite some time in the novel. Simon and Baz it's enemies to lovers, but it was like enemies to insta-love, and it wasn't very believable, especially because Simon believes he's straight and then all of a sudden is totally okay with being gay and being in a relationship with Baz, and I didn't find it realistic at all. So I really liked it. I'm really excited to move on with the series, although I am a little concerned because I thought it wrapped up everything in Carry On. I don't really see how there can be another one, but there is, and then there's another one coming out this year. So there's 2 more in the series so far, and I don't know how. I don't know where it's gonna go. I even read the synopsis of Wayward Son, and I still don't know where it's gonna go. So I am excited to pick it up though and kind of see what happens. It wasn't a perfect book for me, but I did really enjoy it, so I gave it 4 stars. So that is all the books that I read in January, all 17 books. Let me know your thoughts on any of them. If you want to read any of them, if you have read them, what you think about them, I would love to know. And also, please let me know what you think about mid-month wrap-ups instead of all at the end of the month. Because also when I read 17 books, those few that I didn't like or that are just kind of like meh, middle of the road books, I forget things about them when I've read 12 more books after them. So I think if I were to do mid-month wrap-ups, I would remember more, I would have more thoughts, more feelings. They wouldn't become so like stale in the back of my mind. So let me know how you feel about it, and then we'll kind of see what February brings. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video, and I will see you next time. Bye.